Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. Over here on the side of our house, nestled in with the Cabriolet in our trailer, we've had this Dune Buggy sitting here for quite some time. I don't even remember how long it's been here, to be honest. I think I teased it in one of my previous videos. So this is not mine, this is a customer. And when he got it, he said, oh, I drove it around a little bit and then some fuel started coming out of one of the cylinders and it quit, and it has some pretty tremendous welding done on it. Wanted me to clean all that up, paint it, and make it street legal. So I've had a lot of other things going on, so it's kind of been on the back burner, but I'd like to get it out of here, and my wife would love to get it out of here. So upon further inspection, I think all the side panels are made from road signs. I'm not sure what was going on with all this. It has a kingpin front suspension, which is all wasted, and it looks like the front end is a wide 5 bolt pattern with a missing lug nut, but they've machined off the drum, so it's got the front brake delete going on, and the kingpins are shot. I noticed. See how much all that moves, so that's going to need to be addressed. And this side has a lug bolt delete going on. So to make it street legal will require an entire new front end. They've also deleted the rear brakes, or the front brakes, and kind of cobbled all that together, and so this is horrendous. I like how they just pinched off the front brake line. It's going to the rear, and the throttle pedals, the cables, doesn't even work. It's broken off. Anyway, so I've done a little quick look around, and I think we're now to the point, well, actually, the rear has wheel adapters on it. It's a wide 5 lug pattern, but it has adapters like a Chevy bolt pattern or something. Probably the only thing good it has going for it is it appears that it has a bus transmission in it, which was like the hot ticket from what I recall in my high school days for a sand rail, I think for the lower ratio and just stronger, and it's strapped down. Has a dual port engine, single carb, looks like a kind of a Chinesium carb because there's an adapter to it, so I'm not sure what's going on there either. Fuel pump looks new. At any rate, yeah, and this is the voltage regulator. Not really hooked to anything. And there's like a piece of I believe that's part of the winding hanging out of the generator. None of that was hooked up. So yeah, this thing's pretty much a basket case. There's the air cleaner. And has the tractor muffler flap going on. So now we've come to a conclusion that, yeah, this thing is not going to be street legal. So at this point, we're going to try to get it to run and get it to stop and go, and he's going to take it back, make it an off-road buggy like it should be. So we've pushed it around quite a bit and used the engine as the brake, and it did turn. I figured before I went and did anything crazy, make sure it turns all the way, and it'll turn using the belt here anyway. It turns to a certain point and then it stops. Now as long as this thing's been sitting here and with this and this going on, there could be water in the cylinders and there could be water in the crankcase. It's hard to say. And the oil looks good, but I think as a matter of safety, I'm going to go ahead and get down on the crank bolt and turn it and make sure it's just not building compression. So I think as a starting point, we'll go in there and pull the plugs and see if it'll turn all the way over, make sure we don't have a cylinder full of water. Nice thing about a sand rail is pretty easy access to everything. So that's a Bosch Platinum plug. In my experience, you never want to put them in something like this, so they'll need to be replaced anyway. The heat range doesn't even look right, so we'll pull them out and see what happens. I usually apologize for outdoor power equipment noise or music or whatever in my videos, but I think it's the cicadas this year that are picking up. All the plugs are out. This is a 30 millimeter bolt, so let's turn it, see if we can turn all the way. Oh, so she's acting a little tight. I think we'll go to all the cylinders and we'll shoot some PB blaster or something in all of them, lube them up a little bit. So I'm sure that sitting here all this time, one or several of the exhaust or intake valves were open and we'll let moisture get in that cylinder and rust it. So we'll fog it with some PB blaster in each cylinder before we go any further, just to have a little bit of lubrication on it. I'm not sure how this is going to show up on camera. Down in number 1 over here, there appears to be a little pool going on, and I did not put that much blaster in there. I don't know if that's going to show up. Let me shake it a little bit. So I believe that's our cylinder that's going to be full of water. So let's crank it and see if we can push that out of there. This must be where a rust ridge is in these cylinders, because it still comes to one point and stops. That may actually be the fan making that rusty noise too. Exhaust system makes it not very pleasant to do this. Let's be on the compression stroke. All right, we'll turn it around a few more times, make sure we're all clear. So the engine code on this, of course you can't see it, probably not, is an H5. I'm sure that's all washed out in the camera, but it's an H5. That looks like a 1500 6869, but I'll confirm that. Based on the amount of water in that cylinder, there's probably a good amount of water in this crankcase. Some have a drain bolt in the center where we could just unscrew it and let the water out and put it back in and then change the oil after we run it, but this one does not. So cheap as oil is, we'll go ahead and buzz this off and go ahead and change it now. Does not want to come off. There are copper washers that seal this. I'm trying not to lose them. I'm hoping I can reuse this gasket. Yeah, there it comes. And that is water. I guess we could just sit here and let it till it starts running oil out. That'd be one way of doing it. Let's go for broke. Yeah, I'd say that was a good move. Yeah, now we're getting oil. and water combo. There we go. We'll let that drain a while. Figures the last one, the stud comes out. I believe we'll let that drip a while and I'll make a parts list. It occurred to me to make a parts list, I should probably figure out what's going on with this carburetor, because there's some pretty crazy stuff going on here. This is the throttle clip which attaches the cable. And it has an adapter plate on this manifold. I'm not sure what's going on with that. It offsets it this direction to some extent. And it looks like it has plenty of clearance. That may be one that was made for an alternator conversion, because this is just a generator. The more I look at it, looks like this generator may have been in flames at some point. Might explain that piece of winding hanging out of it and why it's not hooked up. But I'm thinking with all the water that got in that cylinder, it got in through the exhaust or through the intake. So we should probably pull this carburetor apart, and it looks suspiciously Chinesium anyway, and see what is going on inside it, clean it out. That's not factory there either. There we go. That carburetor has like no markings on it, so I'm pretty sure that thing's some China's finest. So we'll see what surprises lurk inside there. So I disassembled this carburetor and cleaned some of the junk out of it. It had some white crusty stuff in it. I'll scrub that some more. But the carburetors I'm used to would say Solex right there. So this is obviously some kind of knockoff. This solenoid shuts fuel off, I believe the idle circuit, so it doesn't run on when you turn a key off. That was not hooked up, so I'll have to figure that out. Let's see what else. It has this adapter plate, and that is a really tiny throttle plate. I don't remember any other ones I've taken apart being that small, but it is what it is. So we'll clean this thing up and we'll put it back together and go from there. But nothing looks insurmountable. The diaphragm for the accelerator pump does not look screwed up. The float, all that looks okay. It actually looks fairly new. There went the pin. And the jets, everything cleaned up okay, so that should be an easy part. We'll get that put back together. So this carburetor is mostly back together. It's equipped with an electric choke, so there's a coil inside here that when the engine's running, or I guess even the ignition's on, it heats the coil and makes it expand, and that's what causes your choke to open up, is that choke coil expands. Eventually it'll be fully open like that. Now there's some other stuff over here that when you rev it kind of resets it. So there should be an electrical terminal on the outside of this. Appears to be broken off. It would tip, the ones I've seen look like this, and you'll put the hot wire from the ignition on there. Well, this one's gone. I'm gonna go ahead, I'll pull this off here and show you what this should actually look like. So there's your choke coil. That piece of metal is two different pieces of metals laminated together. And as you heat it, they expand at different rates. So the outside one will kind of expand faster than the inside one, and that'll make it move. And that is what activates the choke plate. So this tab kind of captures it. Come on, get in there. and then you can adjust it by loosening those screws and turning that to set how quickly the choke comes off or how long it stays on. Eventually the heat of the carburetor will heat that coil enough that it'll expand and open the choke, but the electric one kind of helps it along, makes it a little more predictable. So we'll have to figure out a way to connect that. So it sat overnight and all the water and oil dripped out. I put the sump plate back on, checked the screen, it was pretty clean. It was actually spotless. So now, while everybody decided to run the weed eaters and lawnmowers, go ahead and get some oil put back in this thing. I am using 15W40 diesel oil. It says this thing holds about 2.5 quarts. And I'm going to pour it all over the ground, so let's get a funnel. That's about halfway. That's good enough for now. I have connected my booster pack to the battery terminals. Wires are just hanging there because I do not have a battery for this. So I'm going to do the old school, short the starter solenoid out, and let's see if this thing cranks. All right, and didn't appear to be any water or anything shoot out any of the cylinders. Let's see if the ignition switch works. It's up here in the front. It's about half screwed up, but appears to crank it properly. Okay, I have new spark plugs. Let's get them in there. So this had Bosch Platinum plugs in it, which in my experience never do well on an old carbureted engine. And they are, I can read that, somewhere on there. They're 8s. It calls for 6s. I compromise with 7s. These are NGK BPR7HS. This is all the parts store had. I put a little anti-seize on there. You know how much I like that. Since this is a steel thread going into aluminum head, I swear they were not blowing and leaf blowing a minute ago. So let's get some spark plugs in here. And they are gapped at 24 thousandths. I guess they're doing the whole damn neighborhood. Okay, now we'll retrieve the rubber out of there and we'll make sure the firing order is correct. So apparently this lawn work session is never going to end. So we'll just deal with it. I've hooked up my test light. This one is powered and it'll show you if you have power or ground in that other LED in there. So I don't know if that shows up. That green tells you ground. And I will turn the ignition on, at least what I think is the on position. And a minute ago I had power to the coil. Let's try that again. Ground. A minute ago I had power to the coil. Great. Ground. Okay, there is power to the coil right there. If that can be seen. Let's try starting it. I'm pretty much guaranteed it is not going to run until I turn the fuel on. Let's dribble a little bit of fuel down this vent tube into the float bowl, if that's even possible. And a little bit down the carb for good measure. Let's try this. All right, almost wanted to start. Give her a little more help. I think we need a little more power than the booster pack's going to provide. So I think we'll, for right now, we'll take the battery out of the truck. I can use that post. I'll have to rig something up there. The power wire going to the coil has this monster yellow terminal on there, which is way too big. So we'll go ahead and remedy this situation now. That could be giving a bad connection, something I don't want to be chasing later. This wire's likely way too big too. Also, I probably need to power this fuel shutoff solenoid if that's going to work, and the choke. So when the ignition switch is on, power will go to the coil, the electromagnetic shutoff for the fuel, and the choke coil. Let's try this again. I also have the battery for the truck hooked up there with some vice grips and a wing nut. What could possibly go wrong? Wow, that was pretty amazing. All right, well, I'll figure out where the idle adjustment screw is. I'll try to idle this up a little more and actually see if we can get back here with the timing light while it's still running. So I've made a couple attempts. I guess I need to go back to basics. At least I know it'll run. I think next I need to hook up the dwell meter and check the dwell on this thing still has, check the dwell on the points because this thing still has points. And then try to find the timing mark and get it to run long enough to see where the timing is and if I need to adjust that. Seems to RPM okay, but when it comes back down to idle, it wants to fall on its face. Now, I could have more trash in the fuel system. There's no filter on here. The gas in the tank smelled okay, but I should probably verify that, and then maybe even pull the top off the carburetor and see what the fuel level looks like in the float bowl. That may not happen today. So I've topped off the oil. It's full now. No more foam came up in that, or didn't turn white. The reason I use that diesel oil, typically that has more zinc in it, and this engine being 4 bazillion years old, like according to the block number is 50 years old. These have flat tappet cams and they need more of that zinc to help keep from wiping the cam out. And 15W40 is a good oil weight for that, especially for an air-cooled engine that relies on the oil to actually cool the engine also. So this is obviously a hodgepodge engine. It's a dual port, has this weird carburetor, but it has a doghouse shroud. They call it a doghouse because the oil cooler sits kind of on the outside, like on my Porsche and earlier engines. The oil cooler was in here, and it would cool the oil fine, but it would impede airflow to cylinders 3 and 4, most specifically cylinder 3. That's where you usually have your problem, and that's the cylinder that would die first. So they diverted it so it doesn't block as much of the airflow, and the air still gets to the cooler, but it has a better path to the cylinder. So I've also located the top dead center mark, that silver paint right there. And on these VWs, that's what I'm aware of, you line it up with a split in the crankcase. So that's your timing mark, and that's your mark on the pulley. And I verified that it's pointed at number 1, so that should be right. So we may have a few minutes here. I'm going to go in and loosen the distributor bolt where I can turn it, and we'll see if we can start it again. All right, so let me do a little more work on this.